The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and thanks for joining this morning's webinar looking at how businesses can achieve advanced security and protection for diverse cloud environments. My name is Shona Bradshaw. I'm the Marketing Manager for Bytes Security Partnerships, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Chris Beckett, one of the Cloud Security Specialists at Checkpoint. Just a little bit of the agenda for today's session. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping and then I will do a very brief introduction to Bytes. I will keep it very brief, as I understand many of you know as well already, before introducing Chris. What Chris is going to be covering off in his session today is why organisations are looking increasingly at securing diverse cloud environments and best practices in doing so, not just from an application or an infrastructure security, but also from a compliance perspective. Chris will be talking around securing cloud applications, securing traditional infrastructure, and also continuous cloud compliance with Checkpoint's new Dome 9 acquisition. We will then have a Q&A at the end. Little bit of housekeeping for today's session. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout today's presentation, but we do welcome questions. Please post questions via the chat or the questions box, and we'll do an interactive Q&A for Chris at the end. Today's discussions, we will keep to strategy and solutions. We won't be getting in depth into any particular commercials on this session. Of course, those conversations are more than welcome via your Bytes account manager after the call. We are recording today's session, so delighted to share that with yourselves and your teams afterwards. And lastly, a quick request from myself. We do have a very short feedback survey at the end. If you could take just a minute of your time to fill in the short 5-question survey, that would be greatly appreciated, just so that we can ensure that these sessions are continuing to hit the mark for you on a technical level. So without further ado, who are Bytes? Bytes Security Partnerships are the security specialist reseller within the Bytes Altron group. We were purchased by Bytes around 6 years ago now, and what we aim to do is to marry up the considerable agility and insight and the personal specialist approach you would expect from the smallest specialist partner with the scale and the stability and the resources that comes from being part of a multi-billion group and being able to deliver at a global level on larger projects. We're exceptionally proud at Bytes Security Partnerships of the in-house expertise and the technical services that we've developed, particularly around the Checkpoint suite of solutions, such as our 24/7 direct-to-engineer support service. So that allows us to enjoy top-tier vendor statuses, and meaning that we deliver both on a commercial level for customers, but also on a technical level. We work across the full spectrum of information security, from the next generation firewall and standard content security and data security that's been around for many years now, through to the more emerging areas of security, securing multi-cloud environments, securing mobility, securing operation centers, providing managed SIM, etc. And across all of these, what we offer is that technical support and that technical provision of services to enable these technologies to really add value to your services, to your businesses, whether that's in providing training, whether it's helping businesses with security strategy development, whether it's project planning and scoping, or supporting those technologies 24/7. So that's more than enough about us. Why are businesses coming to us with questions around multi-cloud environments and securing multi-cloud environments? Businesses are increasingly looking to find more convenient ways and better ways to be able to configure the same security policies regardless of where those policies are deployed. And at the same time, they're challenged to prove continuous compliance and prove strong security no matter where their data, no matter where their assets reside. At the same time, we have a perfect storm of end user and privileged user attacks that they're seeking to protect those resources from. SaaS application data breaches have never been higher. Zero-day threats on cloud resources have never been higher. And at the same time, businesses have never been more challenged to be able to prove that their data is safe no matter where it resides, with the advent of the dreaded G word last year. And what Checkpoint are going to be talking about this morning is a singular approach and a solution suite which delivers both for infrastructure such as Azure, cloud applications and cloud compliance via one vendor rather than a variety of different point solutions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Chris Beckett. He's the Cloud Security Architect for UK and Ireland at Checkpoint. We've been working with Checkpoint as a 4-star elite partner for many years because they really are leading the way in next generation firewalls and perimeter security and endpoint security for cloud. They secure more than 100,000 businesses worldwide and are protecting millions of users across the globe. So they're a really fantastic resource to share their insight, their expertise and their solutions that you can deploy in order to look to resolve some of the cloud challenges that I've referred to before. So I'm just going to pass over to Chris now, and he'll take you through strategies and solutions to secure diverse cloud environments. Over to Chris.
Thank you, Shona. Okay. Can you see that okay?
I can indeed. I'm just going to mute off now so you don't have me in the background.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Beckett. I'm the Cloud Security Architect for UK and Ireland at Checkpoint. I've been with Checkpoint since last July, and I've been in this business a long time, working for different partners and working in different verticals. So I've seen quite a lot of different challenges, business challenges, technical challenges. And what we're going to go through today is really how Checkpoint address a lot of the cloud-related challenges that we're seeing in the market now. And as Shona says, rather than using point solutions for every individual challenge, to try and address that in a more cohesive and singular manner. So the agenda for this session is I'll give you an overview of the CloudGuard suite, some pieces of which you may be familiar, some you won't. We'll have a look at what kind of problems are we trying to solve in the cloud. And again, Shona's touched on a lot of these already, and we'll have a slightly deeper dive into that. We'll look at how CloudGuard can help improve your multi-cloud security. And then if we have time at the end, we'll look at some demos and also some CloudGuard IaaS demos just to try and augment some of the slideware. And then time permitting, we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So the CloudGuard suite, if you're not familiar with it, so let me just get this off the screen. If you're not familiar with it, comprises 3 products now. We've got CloudGuard SaaS, CloudGuard IaaS, and CloudGuard Dome 9. In the left-hand segment, you can see CloudGuard SaaS. This is, as the name would suggest, a SaaS-based product that connects into essentially end-user products in the cloud, so the likes of Office 365, G Suite, Box, Slack, ServiceNow, etc. All the ones you can see on there. We're adding integration to it all the time. And the type of features that we include out of the box at the moment, you can see around the left-hand edge include identity protection, data loss protection, zero-day protection, shadow IT discovery, anti-phishing and anomaly detection. Features have been added to it all the time, and the great thing is about SaaS products is they're very much kind of plug and play. So once you've created some credentials for us to access these different application platforms, we don't deploy any agents or anything like that. There's nothing to deploy on-prem. There's no sort of service to deploy in the cloud. You connect that into your environment, and then you're pretty much off and running. So there's a very, very quick deployment time and a very quick return on value in terms of putting CloudGuard SaaS in. On the right-hand side of the segment, we've got CloudGuard IaaS, which is the more traditional network-based network virtual appliance approach that you're most likely familiar with. We've been doing that on-prem for some 25 years now, and we've been NSS recommended for I think 17 out of 18 years that they've been doing these tests. And as you can see by the right-hand edge, because it's such a mature product over a long period of time, a lot of the functionality has evolved and matured. We've added additional features to it, and it's extremely comprehensive, as you can see. So we've got the likes of IPS, URL filtering, application control, identity awareness, of course, firewall, antivirus, anti-bot, and a whole pile of other things as well. But one thing that we do with CloudGuard IaaS is, rather than just kind of ripping the code from a physical gateway, putting it into a virtual machine and kind of saying, there you go, that's cloud, we actually augment that with some other services as well, around the likes of auto provisioning, which means that when we provision additional gateways in the cloud through auto scaling, we can automatically bring those into Smart Center, into Smart Console, sorry. We apply whichever policy you want to apply and apply a license, enable the software blades, and then you're off to go. And then as soon as you scale back in again, if that happens, the same process happens in reverse. So in terms of growing and shrinking your environment, if this is what you need, then it's completely zero touch. This could happen, you know, in the middle of the night, and you never have to worry about that. And again, it's something that's fairly unique to Checkpoint, something that we do that gives you value within the cloud and make sure that obviously you've got the appropriate throughput and coverage that you need for your environment, but also, you know, you don't spend more than you need, and you only scale when you need to. And that's not applicable in every case, but generally speaking, a lot of the deployments we do now around auto scaling just because it offers so much more flexibility. But what you can see from the top here is the different public cloud platforms that we support. So you'll see the usual suspects of AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure, which make up the vast bulk of the business that we see right now. But we have got some challenges as well. Alibaba Cloud has a few use cases at the moment. We're starting to see a drip of UK customers coming into Oracle OCI now, which is interesting. And of course, we've also got VMware and AWS here, which again has some fairly common use cases with people that already have VMware on-prem and are looking to bridge that gap between moving from on-prem into the public cloud. Looking at the bottom part of the segment, these are the private cloud environments that we support from CloudGuard IaaS. So at the moment, we've got OpenStack, Nutanix, NSX, KVM, vCenter, Cisco ACI, Nuage, and Hyper-V. And all this is managed from one central point. So this management server that sits in the middle manages all these disparate clouds. It's a single point of management. It's a single point of logs. It's a single set of rule bases you can apply to all these different platforms, and it just simplifies the environment. One of the things that we talked about was having, you know, a solution for this and a solution for that. We can consolidate this down into one platform, and this management server can either live on-prem in your existing data center, so you can extend what you've already got. Sorry, I was a bit keen with the arrow there. You can extend what you've already got, or you can just deploy it in the cloud and run it from there if you like. So you've got complete freedom of choice. And the other thing to note about the licensing as well is in the public cloud, if you buy 100 core licenses for CloudGuard IaaS, you can use those across AWS. If you move from AWS into Azure, or you've got some left over, you can just basically bring those licenses across. So it's full flexibility of licensing. You don't have to buy 50 for AWS, 50 for Azure, 20 for OCI. It's one set of licenses, it's licensed per core like we do now, and then you just bring it into the environment that you need it. So it's extremely flexible, extremely cost effective, and also means that you don't have to worry about painting yourself into a corner with your cloud security. You know, if you're thinking, well, I mean, if I buy AWS, I'm stuck with that. Not necessarily. You know, you could move to Azure as well. And a number of customers now are actually going down the multi-cloud path as well. And there can be a variety of reasons for that, but primarily, a lot of the time, it's down to one of two factors. It's either mergers and acquisitions, where you bring in on another organization that already has an established presence in these environments, or alternatively, it can be around selecting the best tool for the job. So, for example, AWS, Lambda is their serverless functions offering. That's been around for quite a while, probably the first one into the market. It's a very stable and mature environment. It's very well known about. So if you were looking at serverless functions, you may pick AWS. If you have a lot of investment into SQL Server, you may choose to run SQL Server in Azure because it's probably more cost effective to run it on an all Microsoft stack. It's one backside to kick if you need support. And obviously, because Microsoft own Azure and own SQL, you know, they can tune performance of that far better than probably any other cloud platform provider can do. And similarly, Google Cloud Platform, if you're looking at containers and you're looking at orchestration of containers through Kubernetes, Google basically created Kubernetes and open sourced it. So there's a managed Kubernetes service on GCP. And you may think that, well, again, because Google probably know more about it than anybody, I may be better running my Kubernetes workloads in Google Cloud. So, like I say, what we try and do is give you that flexibility of choice, give you the option of moving between different cloud platforms, and being very agile about that as to how you want to do it. In the bottom part of the segment is the completing piece of the CloudGuard trifecta, which is CloudGuard Dome 9. This is a company that we acquired late 2018, around October, November time. And Dome 9, again, very much like CloudGuard SaaS, is a born in the cloud product. There's no agents to deploy. There's no server infrastructure to provision. It's all API based. It uses standard platform access methods such as access keys and IAM roles, that type of thing, certificates for Google Cloud. And the way that it works is Dome 9, you create an account, you can go along to dome9.com, sign up for a free trial. You can onboard a cloud account, and that can be Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or AWS. You can have a mixture of all of them. And you can run it in two modes, and we'll come to this shortly, but essentially you can run it in read-only mode, which is pretty much what it says it is, monitors the multi-cloud environment, sends alerts, and can give you a better view of what's going on across all three of the different platforms and all the different accounts and subscriptions and projects within those. But also, what we got across the bottom is the ability to provide extra levels of service over and above what the cloud native platform provides. So for example, with AWS, we provide IAM safety, which gives you guardrails against either misconfigurations or malicious attacks by locking out and time boxing elevated permissions into that platform. We've also got compliance, which is very popular with Dome 9 customers, which allows you to have an assessment of your security posture in your cloud environment against typical industry standard benchmarks such as Pci Dss, HIPAA, GDPR, etc., etc. We can also provide an inventory of everything that you've got in your cloud environments, which, you know, if you've looked at some of these environments, AWS has a very region-centric view of things and an account view of things, which is fine, and, you know, kind of people are used to that. But if you've got a lot of resources deployed across many regions, many different accounts, to see that in a consolidated view is extremely difficult. So what we do with Dome 9 is present the inventory in a way that you can see all of these different connected cloud platforms and see them in one view and be able to drill down into those and manage them. We also offer a read-write functionality in Dome 9. I mentioned the sort of two different modes before, and read-write essentially will let you take over management of security groups. So we can do tamper protection on security groups. So you can set a security group how you want it. This gets pushed from Dome 9 into the cloud environment. That then gets locked. So if anyone goes into either the web console or tries to make a change programmatically through API or whatever, you know, SDK or command line or PowerShell or however, we will recognize that and we will stop that from happening and roll the change back. We also have an option called region lock, which, as it says it does, locks security groups at a region level. And if anybody brings resources in, adds in new security groups, Dome 9 will spot that. These security groups will get emptied, and those security groups will get brought into Dome 9 to be managed from a central point. Like all SaaS products, it's API driven in the sense that we use APIs to connect into the management platform, so we don't use any agents or shims or any bits of code workaround or anything like that. It's all native access to these three platforms. So all the management APIs across those three different platforms you see, which means that anytime, you know, they make a change, they make an improvement or whatever, we can go with that as well. And also from an API perspective, we also have an API within Dome 9 that you can consume. So if you want to do something programmatically within Dome 9, we also have the option to use an API. So things like workflows, or if you're using infrastructure as code tools, that sort of thing, you can call out to Dome 9 and perform operations using that as well. And the last item on Dome 9 is network security. You can visualize your cloud environments. Because we're bringing in information about security groups, what we can do is process those and present a pictorial view of actually what that looks like in reality in terms of your exposure to the internet through all your different cloud resources, and also kind of how the traffic flows between all those interconnected points. So it's similar to a service map. It's not exactly the same. This is a product called Clarity. And again, this works across all three cloud platforms. We will be bringing online a new module soon called Magellan. This is primarily based around AWS at the moment, and this consumes VPC flow logs and CloudTrail logs. So we bring those together and we can augment the information that we get from that to give you alerts and views on what's happening within your cloud environment. So another thing to bear in mind is the fact, and I mentioned that we're NSS recommended 17 years out of 18, but also if you look at this, Threat Cloud and the different angles that we cover from within the R80 suite. So we cover endpoint, mobile, cloud, and network, as you probably already know. But one of the key things is we have shared threat intelligence in Threat Cloud. So we've got lots of indicators of compromise coming from lots of different areas. We also get metadata back from gateways for those customers that have enabled it, and it feeds into this kind of central brain of cyber attacks and things that are going on out there that we want to keep an eye on. Dome 9 also now consumes this, and also with Threat Cloud, you've got the Threat Cloud IntelliStore, which you may not have seen, and what that allows you to do is augment this still further by adding in indicators of compromise from particular network verticals like maybe financial services, maybe healthcare, that sort of thing. You can subscribe to that. Those feeds will come into Threat Cloud for you to consume and gives you, again, additional coverage over and above what we do within the standard Threat Cloud and our security tools here. And again, coming back to this point of why Checkpoint is the market leader, we've got the highest catch rate, something like 99.95%, and we're very focused on prevention rather than detection. A lot of the cloud native tools kind of operate on this freemium model whereby you can sign up to these services, such as Guard Duty and Azure Security Center and Threat Protection and all the likes of that. But they're only at a very basic level, and if you want to kind of step up to the enterprise class, you need to pay for that. That's usually done by consumption. So again, it can prove to be quite an expensive way of managing that estate. If you're multi-cloud, obviously you've got to go to 3 different places and configure that and pay for it, etc., and it does get kind of messy. But we're very focused on prevention. We believe it's cheaper and quicker and better than detection. And this is all part of the Infinity framework, which we're obviously moving forward now into future releases, R8030, Infinity 2, etc. So what problems are we trying to solve? I mean, amongst others, we want to get a single view of all cloud assets. So specifically in Dome 9, we can look at AWS, Azure, and GCP all in a single view. We can quickly filter out by entity characteristics. So platform, which platform it's on, is this resource publicly addressable, etc. Which region is it in? We can filter that down. There's lots of different options around that. We can onboard new cloud accounts via the portal or through command line. So there's some GitHub scripts if you are building a lot of infrastructure as code. If you're in a highly dynamic and agile environment, you can add that into your existing build frameworks and have those automatically onboarded when that service is provisioned. Compliance is tricky in the cloud. Dome 9 ships with canned compliance checks. I mentioned there's a lot of common industry standard certifications in here, such as Pci Dss, GDPR, HIPAA, CIS, etc., etc. And we can also perform continuous compliance. So every hour, depending on what you set, Dome 9 will log into your cloud environments, perform these compliance checks, make sure everything's as it should be. If there are any changes that you need to know about, any alerts, you get told straight away. You can go in there and perform remediation. There is some level of remediation that we can do automatically. Currently, that's AWS only. It will be coming to Azure this year. And you've also got the option of writing your own compliance bundles. It's all well and good having this compliance engine, and it's great having continuous compliance and the fact that we cover a lot of these industry standard compliance requirements, but sometimes it's nice to have that ability to customize these queries to be able to run them against your own corporate standards. So a classic one is having a nominated region to deploy cloud resources. Some organizations will nominate Dublin or London or Amsterdam or wherever to deploy these cloud assets. And you can use Dome 9 very quickly and simply to write a little bit of code to run a query to tell you, what's compliant with being in Ireland and what's not compliant. And straight away being able to find out what it is you need to fix. A misconfiguration happens. You know, it doesn't. A lot of the time, we seem to focus on you know, people being malicious and having malicious intent, and hackers and things like that, maybe disgruntled employees, but more commonly, it's more likely to be a misconfiguration, and it happens. You know, we're humans, we make mistakes, we get distracted, you know, we click on the wrong thing by accident, you know, whatever. So what we try and do with Dome 9 is to try and reduce the impact of misconfigurations by showing you your network configuration with clarity, protecting your security groups from misconfiguration with the tamper controls, and also with IAM safety, providing just-in-time elevated privilege management. So if someone needs to go into AWS and perform a destructive action, such as maybe deleting keys, terminating an instance, deleting Route 53 zones or something like that, what we can do within Dome 9 is to say, right, okay, you need to request permission to do that. We'll grant you an access token for a predetermined amount of time. Once your task is complete, you can either hit the stop button. We do this out of band on a mobile app, which runs on Android or iPhone. And then that token gets revoked, or the time period elapses, token gets revoked, and you lose those permissions. So it's important to sort of be aware of all these different factors that can impact your security posture in the cloud. And it isn't just about hackers, it's also about human beings being the weakest link in that security chain and making mistakes and making misconfigurations, and that's what we try and guard against. So Dome 9 and the rest of the CloudGuard suite can help with multi-cloud security. Specifically to Dome 9, it's 100% API driven. As I mentioned, we connect to native cloud provider APIs. We don't have any workarounds. It's not custom code. It's not shims. It's everything that they provide us. Therefore, it's best practice. We support all three major clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP. So 99.95% of use cases, I think, would be covered by that. And the same is true for CloudGuard IaaS as well. Quick and simple onboarding of cloud accounts. You can be up and running in minutes, and it literally is that quick. No agents, no infrastructure to deploy. It's just a SaaS product that you plug into your cloud environments, and away you go. And it's a very simple license model. It's licensed by virtual machine or managed database instance. So think AWS RDS or Azure SQL. And we don't license for tiny VMs. So if the micro or nano in AWS, if they're the 0 series in Azure or the F1 series in GCP, we don't charge a license for that, because basically they're so tiny we just treat them as test and dev workloads. So it's a pretty fair agreement in terms of licensing as well. The other good thing about the licensing, and I mentioned, again, just to reiterate with CloudGuard IaaS, you can buy core licenses for CloudGuard IaaS and move them between any platforms anytime you like. As long as you've got, obviously, the appropriate number of licenses for the number of gateway cores that you're running, you're all set. So just a quick view of Dome 9 and how we onboard an account. It's all wizard driven. I mentioned the two modes, read only and manage. Manage is the read write. Sorry, let me just clear this down off the screen. So we'll monitor and read only. We'll provide alerts for changes. And what we try and do is, when we're running proof of concepts for Dome 9, we will try and run it against the production environment in read-only mode, because that way the data we get back actually means something. If you run it against a test subscription or account with a couple of VMs in it and a load balancer, actually the data that comes back from that is not all that useful. And also running it in read-only mode runs the, read-only mode means that it can't run amok, it can't make changes, it can't destroy stuff. So you can kind of rest easy on that front as well. And it just means that when you get to the end of your PLC, everything that you got within your inventory is real, and you're actually seeing a real view of the value that Dome 9 can bring. I also mentioned managing security groups for all clouds from a single point. This is obviously something that you'd use manage mode for, and again, security groups tend to be thought of as the main security tool within the cloud, certainly in terms of network access. And at the end of the day, security groups are fine and great as part of a layered approach to cloud security, but they're not the silver bullet. They're effectively a very simple, stateful packet filtering firewall. So they'll look at source and destination IP addresses and ports, and they'll have a whitelist that can get through. But ultimately, they don't do any kind of packet inspection. They don't do any sort of IPS. They don't do any kind of URL filter or anything like that. There's no real added value other than being kind of the nightclub bouncer on the door. So it's, if your name's on the list, you can come in, but they're not checking your pockets. You could be bringing anything into that nightclub. So the inventory, as I mentioned, it's a single view of all connected cloud assets. You can filter by region. I've already covered this, but a lot of these links are hyperlinked, so you can drill into security groups. You can look at IP configuration. We have integration points into things like AWS Inspector, into Guard Duty. We also provide integration into AWS Security Hub, and that kind of segues into another little point of choosing Checkpoint as your cloud partner has a lot of value, because when these cloud providers announce new technologies and new services, there are really good real-life examples of Checkpoint being right beside of them as they announce them, to say, yes, we integrate with that, yes, we support it, yes, we're certified. AWS Inspector and Guard Duty and Security Hub are all examples of that. In terms of Azure, you may know that Virtual WAN was announced back in about August time at Microsoft Ignite, and the demo that they gave on stage of Virtual WAN was used Checkpoint technology. So that goes to show you that you're not waiting 90 days, 100 days, 6 months, however long, for us to be able to provide the support. We work very closely with our technology partners, and we bring these integrations to the table as soon as they're ready. Compliance and governance, as I mentioned. So Dome 9 ships with a number of pre-built compliance bundles, PCI DSS, some best practice ones, ISO 27001, NIST, you can see them on the screen there. I also covered continuous compliance, so every hour we can go in and run either the checks that come out of the box, or we can run custom checks that you write. You can mix and match, it doesn't really matter, to help keep you secure and also compliant if that's a concern for the industry that you work in. We also keep a full history of all assessments that we do. This is written to an immutable log, so we can't get anyone going in there, deleting a line when they've done something. Every compliance check that runs, whether that's manually, whether that's continuous compliance, whether that's generated by drawing a system dashboard, everything gets put into that audit log, so you can see everything that happened at every time, and gives you a baseline score of what your posture is in terms of a percentage. There are two types of compliance bundles. There are Dome 9 provided and there are custom ones. Custom ones, obviously, as we discussed, you can write your own. The Dome 9 ones, Dome 9 managed ones, are read-only. You can clone them and edit them if you want to maybe delete some rules or maybe add a couple of custom rules. That's entirely up to you. But the Dome 9 managed bundles are constantly being improved, refined, added to, and also we're adding new checks as we go as well across all the different platforms. And the reason why they're all listed as platform specific is obviously we're using different API calls to those platforms to extract that data to bring it back into the report. Governance specification language is kind of the query language that we use within Dome 9 to get a compliance view. This is kind of like SQL. It's a structured query language, but it's intended to be human readable. It's intended to be very simple, not complex. And what we can do is we've got a couple of different options of writing your own text. There's a free text view you can use that has an autocomplete. So if you type in instance, it will bring up all the matches for instance. If you use the rule builder, it's a bit more drag and drop, and helps you build that rule without having to consult reams and reams of documentation and having to flick back from one screen to another and all the rest of it. You can write code very quickly, test it out in the sandbox, check that the syntax is correct, check that you're getting the results you expect, and then if everything's good, you can then publish that into one of your bundles and off you go. There is also a public facing repository of GSL code that's already been written for customers that address fairly common questions that aren't part of the core compliance bundles. And if you just go to gsl.dome9.com, there's a list you can filter out by platform, and essentially you just copy and paste the GSL, drop it into a bundle, and you're done. So why reinvent the wheel when you don't have to? You can run queries against a single cloud account, a single region, or all accounts on a cloud provider platform. So again, you're not running millions of checks. You can consolidate that down to a fairly small number if you want to. This is the network security that I talked about. This view is clarity. This gives you a pictorial view of your cloud network environment based on what we pull in from the security groups. You can trace traffic flow between point A and point B. So as you look at this view, hopefully that picture's rendered reasonably well. From the left to the right, these are called swim lanes, and these refer to the level of exposure that this resource has got to the internet. So in the external zone, you'll see the likes of the whole internet, maybe some specific IP addresses let through for a particular reason. What you can also do is, if you've got a branch office, for example, that's sat behind a NAT gateway that has a known external IP address, you can put that into DOM9 manually, and then when you go into Clarity, rather than seeing an IP address, you'll see Dublin office, Birmingham office, whatever, and straight away it makes sense to you, and it's contextual to you. The effective view provides an aggregated policy view of instances that are assigned to any given virtual network. And it's also contextual. So every time we click on one of these objects in the right-hand column, the view will change to represent what the resource is, what security groups it's part of, if it has any tags, and you can see all of that as well. And all of those with a little paperclip link next to them, you can drill further into those resources and manage them if you want to. This is a view of our security group management. This is a security group within AWS. So within this, you can see all the different rules that we've got allowed through, which members of the group, etc. On the left-hand side, again, there are some related links. You can drill in and find more detail. The top right, the Tamper Protection has been enabled. This is just a toggle button. You can turn it off and on for whatever you need. And we also keep a history as well, which is quite handy. So within security groups in AWS, you can go back and look at what's changes that have happened within the last 12 months. So if a service has stopped working that worked previously, or conversely, if people are now hitting something that they shouldn't be from the internet, you can come in, look at the history view, and determine what change happened at what time. Magellan, as I mentioned, is the new feature that's coming along in the next couple of months. This, as I mentioned, will bring in information from CloudTrail and from VPC flow logs in AWS to augment that view. And we already know malicious IP addresses because we bring in feeds from lots of different places, not just ThreatCloud, but some other third parties as well. And we don't just focus on virtual machines. There's probably this thought that everything in the cloud is a virtual machine, but these days there's a lot of people using platform as a service, so we can consume RDS, we can consume Lambda functions, we can look at NAT gateways, load balancers, etc. So it's quite a broad view of the cloud platform. It isn't just virtual machine centric, because as we know, the cloud's a whole lot more than virtual machines. But what it does do is provide you a near real-time view of what's going on within your environment. It uses GSL, as we've already talked about. So there will be some pre-canned reports in there. You could look at malicious traffic from China, for example. You can look at any administrator role that's been assigned within IAM. You can consume that within a log, and it just gives you a much more visual and pictorial view of your cloud security environment in AWS. IAM safety I mentioned already. Again, this is specific to AWS because there's a lot of functionality we can do within this that you would do within privileged identity management in Azure. But we can harden the AWS account console, restrict users from making unauthorized or accidental changes, enable tamper protection, pretty much all the stuff that we've mentioned so far. But it just gives you a little bit of guardrails around if you do any sort of outsourcing of your cloud support. This is one of the use cases that we see, is that an organization builds a cloud environment, they'll hand it off to an outsourcing company to manage, but they want to make sure that safeguards are in place that either maliciously or by accident. Things can't get deleted or overwritten or anything like that. So a very quick demo time. I'll quickly show you Dome 9, and then I'll quickly show you a view into CloudGuard IaaS as well. So I'm just conscious of time. We'll just have a couple of minutes on this, but I'll just quickly show you the compliance view. So for example, if I scroll down, if I filter out by platform, which I can do, so I'll filter out AWS, and I'll filter by, I'll run the Pci Dss Check. You'll see these are all the checks that we run. A description of the check, how to remediate any issues that you find, the GSL that we used to generate this finding, and as you can see, it's really, really simple. Kinesis should have it encrypted equals true, and there's a whole pile of these. And what we try and do is, when we provide references, we try and point to third-party feeds, whether that's the cloud provider documentation themselves, or whether that's the compliance documentation for PCI or whatever, rather than us saying this is the best practice. We can back that up by using third-party feeds as well. But if I very quickly run that assessment and pick an account, run it on prod, and hope that doesn't give an error. But what happens is this is if you wanted to do this via a scripted method, or if you wanted to roll your own, would take quite a long period of time, would require like Liam Neeson, a very specific set of skills to do this. But Dome 9 can do this really quickly, he said. But this is an automatic validation of your AWS environment against PCI compliance. Typical demo. Okay, I'll come back to that because we're a little short on time. Oh, no, it's heard me. Okay, here we go. So this is just a quick pictorial view of my Pci Dss Check. Gives you a baseline score. So you can see we're almost 70% compliant, which is not bad, obviously room for improvement. And this tool can be used to show auditors. We can show failed tests by rule severity. So there's a RAG status, obviously, red, amber, and green, which entities we've tested. So as I said, we're not focused just on VMs. We're focused on lots of different things, VMs, RDS, storage, IAM, etc. A geolocation of the particular resources that have failed the check. And then as you roll down here, you can expand. We tested 95 resources. 95 resources are relevant to the check, and a whacking 94% of those are non-compliant. And this is a list of all these different cloud resources that we need to remediate. And again, in terms of a filter view, there's lots of different filters we can apply. So we can filter out the high, we can filter out storage, we can filter out PCI compliance section even if we wanted to. So again, it's really, really flexible, and it's really, really quick. I wanted to just jump back quickly and show you some CloudGuard IaaS stuff. So this you've probably seen before. This is our Smart Console. This is the R8020 release. And within R8020, what we can do in here, if you've not seen this before, is we can use characteristics native to the cloud platform. So we can, rather than managing very monolithically on subnets and IP addresses and CIDR blocks and all those sorts of things, we can now define data center objects that refer to cloud characteristics such as tags, availability zones, regions, security groups, subscriptions, accounts, etc. And we can apply access control rules along those lines. So looking at this specifically, this first example is anything in Azure that is tagged with access to AWS equals true, and I can hover over that and you can see it's come from Azure, and you can see which IP addresses are referred to by that tag. And then these are the destinations that are allowed, and you'll see that these are AWS data centers, it's an availability zone, it's EU Ireland. And in this particular example, we're allowing any service through, we're accepting that and we're logging it. In this particular example, we're allowing anything that's called web access, web client access to cloud-based services. So if I click on this link, we've got something within R8020 called updatable objects. And again, my demo's not running very smoothly today. But updatable objects are a lot of these service endpoints that the cloud providers give you, such as Azure Storage, S3, Route 53, all those sorts of things. Behind those service endpoints, a lot of those IP addresses change fairly frequently. So what we do with updatable objects is, rather than you having to pull down weekly a list of the IP address ranges and what services they correlate to, and then coming into Smart Console and changing that, updatable objects will do that for you and update those IP addresses. And my Smart Console has crashed, which is great. So you can be very granular about these services. You can pick a service. So in this particular case, it's anything going to Azure Cloud in UK South and UK West. And we talked about nominating a particular region. My Smart Console's bashed. Okay. But as I say, we can connect in these cloud environments and we can pick in these characteristics and we can add them to the access control policy. And the big benefit of that is whenever you move a workload, change a workload, move it from pre-prod into production, or change tags in it or anything like that, the gateways are automatically updated to reflect that, and then it automatically assumes that security posture without you having to do anything. So almost in a way, it's kind of like set it and forget it in terms of network access control rules. So I do apologize for the demo gods not smiling on us today. Seems to be one of those days. Any questions so far while we wait for that? I don't think there's any in the chat window. So just to summarize, as I realize we're a little short on time, Dome 9 specifically provides market-leading security analysis across all three main public cloud environments, and CloudGuard IaaS and CloudGuard SaaS also provide market-leading security features across a lot of the common public and, in terms of IaaS, private cloud environments as well. As I mentioned, CloudGuard IaaS, a single point of management, single point of logs, single pool of licenses, very, very straightforward. Consolidates a lot of your infrastructure down and uses the Infinity framework and things like Threat Cloud and Threat Cloud IntelliStore. Tamper Protection provides guardrails against misconfiguration and malicious actions with security groups and also with IAM. We can do that. Continuous compliance checks from Dome 9 hourly into all your connected cloud environments, and also bringing in the cloud functionality such as auto provisioning for auto scaling within the within Azure, GCP and AWS, but then also providing functionality over and above that using updatable objects. So you can just set that by a logical object rather than an IP address, and also using things like tag values, availability zones, regions, etc. So we've covered quite a lot there. Hopefully you've got a good sense of where we are with the CloudGuard product set. It's evolving rapidly. R8030 is already in the works and will make an appearance at some point this year. So already the velocity of change has started to accelerate within Checkpoint to correspond with sort of the way the world is moving as well. So I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, obviously talk to the guys at Bytes. They're really, really knowledgeable and really good Checkpoint partners. So please use those guys wherever you can. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So just want to invite the audience to ask any questions and pop those in via the chat or the questions box. So I can pose those to Chris for the end if there's anything that's occurred to you from a technical perspective on CloudGuard IaaS, SaaS or Dome 9. Please just do type those questions in and I will pose them to him. While hopefully you're merrily typing away, I just want to thank Chris very much for his time in presenting this morning, giving us a comprehensive overview of some of the newer solutions and the different sort of three pillars of how Checkpoint can assist in cloud protection Protection and for diverse cloud environments. Also want to thank you all very much for your time in terms of joining us this morning, taking time out of your very busy schedules to, have a look at this topic and take time to, out to actually attend the webinar this morning as well. We have recorded today's session, so I will make sure that that is distributed to everyone who's attended, so you can review, you can share with your wider teams as well, and I'll do that after the session. And please do just fill in that feedback survey if you've got a minute after the webinar to do so. So I haven't got any particular questions come in. Obviously, if anything occurs to you after the session, please do speak to your account manager, or please feel free to email me directly, and I'll pass those questions on to the right people at Bytes here, and the right people at Checkpoint from a technical perspective as well. So I haven't got any further questions, so obviously it's been quite comprehensive in terms of what you've seen. So thanks everyone for attending. I'm just going to wrap up the session now. Thank you.